from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Barnett and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. This is the Inside Scoop. Tonight we're going to be talking about politics and technology. In the second half of the show, we're going to be talking with Tom Starr, who's one of the most powerful leaders in telecom in the nation. He's written a new book, a novel about technology. We'll be talking about that book, but also going to be talking about the future of technology. In the first half of the show, though, we're going to be talking to an old friend, to Jennifer Boysco. Last November, Jennifer came within 32 votes of winning her race for the House of Delegates in the Herndon area of Virginia. 32 votes, 0.15% of the 22,000 that were cast. That must have been heartbreaking. So, has that turned you off politics?
Well, Jeff, you know, actually it hasn't. I connected with so many people throughout the year that they understood what I was trying to do and connected with what mission I had, and I am not going to give up. I left that race feeling energized, actually, because I know that I can make a difference, and really felt very enthusiastic about it. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me on the show tonight, too.
Well, are you going to run again?
I'm planning to, yes. In fact, I've been having conversations with folks over the past few weeks. Folks who had endorsed me, different groups, are encouraging me to start taking steps already, even though it's, a year and a half away. So, yeah, I'm planning to run again.
What were some of the groups that endorsed you last time?
I had a broad base of different organizations, from the labor unions to women's health groups, including Planned Parenthood, Emily's List, Virginia NARAL, to progressive groups like Democracy for America. I actually used to work for Howard Dean, so that was a natural fit for me. But also some of the smaller organizations that focus on things like immigration. The Virginia New Majority is one of them, for instance. Okay. I had broad-based support.
We'll be talking a lot of those issues in this show, but there is an important election tomorrow in your hometown of Herndon.
That's right.
So what do we need to know about that?
Well, tomorrow is election day, and in these off-season elections, these town elections, the turnout is very small. So I want to encourage everybody who lives in the town of Herndon to come out and vote tomorrow. I'm supporting Lisa Merkel, who is our current mayor. I think she's done a fabulous job focusing on balancing the needs of the people who've lived there in town, making sure that we preserve our small town charm, but also welcoming businesses as we explore metro expansion out into the Dulles corridor. We are the gem of the Dulles area, and Lisa has been really forward thinking and excellent planning in the way she has addressed this proactively, making sure that we stay the course and move forward so that we still have a wonderful little town to live in.
And has that been the key issue in that campaign?
That has been the key, actually. Her opponent really prefers to keep things as they are, and has not been as supportive of expansion around our metro stations. I disagree with that. I think if we are smart about it and we set the parameters, we're going to be better off because we will have planned for it. Lisa actually, before she was even on the town council, I worked for Supervisor John Faust, you know, and was in charge of the planning area for the innovation station on his staff. Lisa was on that committee, a citizens group, to talk about how that should be planned. And so we looked at the transportation, we looked at infrastructure capacity, and we looked at how businesses would be expected to help make sure that we didn't go over our capacity, but also creating a vibrant facades of buildings and streetscapes and stuff like that. Those are the kinds of things that Lisa really has a great handle on, and I know she'll do a great job.
Oh, good. And is that the only election, just the mayoral election?
No, actually,
City council,
the entire town council is up. It's all at large. And so the first 6 people who have the highest votes win. And so Sheila Olam is an incumbent that I'm supporting, and Grace Wolf is the other incumbent that I'm supporting. And then I'm also standing up with 4 challengers: Jennifer Baker, Eric Bowl, Rick Nagel and Jeff Davidson. So I'm putting all my support behind those people, and I hope that all the Herndon voters who are watching tonight, make sure you get out and vote. Thanks.
I know Eric Bull, and I'm sure he's working his tail off for this.
They have worked very hard, and they've done a lot of door-to-door knocking, which I did a lot of that too, and have been really impressed with all their efforts and energies.
When you did your door-to-door knocking, what kind of issues were people focused on at that level? And I'll just give you, let's say education. What do people want? What's the vision? What's the issues that are around education that we need to know about?
Well, that's a great question. I served on my Herndon High School's PTSA for I'm in my 7th year there, and I have 2 teenage daughters. So I've lived through, some of the struggles that we have. The sleep issue is one that people are concerned with, but really the crux of it is the incessant testing, multiple choice tests, and really leaving out the critical thinking and the problem solving. We have to do better for our children. We have some of the best schools in the country, and our kids in Fairfax County end up going to some fabulous schools, from the wonderful Nova that we have here to our great state schools, and then some who go on to places out of state. But watching
Rachel Carson Middle School.
That's in the 86th district.
And that was just named like the best middle school in the area in some sort of a poll.
It's amazing, the things that these students end up doing. We have wonderful kids doing robotics and other kinds of STEM programs. Our students are ready to excel when they get out. But again, they're just rote memorization and teaching to pass tests. By the way, it is testing time in Virginia, and so we have the SOLs and we have the AP exams right now, and the kids are really focusing, and it's stressful for them. So also another issue that I focused on extensively is our kids' mental health, making sure that we're taking care of the whole person, not just making sure that their grades are excellent. And part of that is prevention of drugs and alcohol abuse, but also making sure that they have balance in their lives and they realize that they are not just a number on a report card.
One of the old jokes is that it's no child left untested. And so are you against all tests, or are you cutting back tests, or what's your approach on testing?
Well, I think we need to rethink, this all came about, the excessive testing in my mind came about when we did the No Child Left Behind. And I would prefer that we set some guidelines, and I know that they're starting to do this a little bit more, choosing when they're going to do the SOLs. Maybe in the 2nd grade they don't need as much testing as being in kindergarten. They don't need to be getting ready for tests. I understand at the high school level they got to be ready for it, but making sure that we're assessing things before they start a lesson and then after, to make sure that the content is actually being absorbed. And also, again, working on writing and critical thinking and problem solving. So a little bit outside the box. My daughter was in AP literature her senior year, and she is a voracious reader. We've had a book club from the time she was in the 4th grade together, a mother-daughter book club. And she did not have time to actually read the novels that were assessed. And it broke my heart because it was some of the great pieces of literature. But she learned how to, pick up the little pieces that she needed, and she aced the AP exam. But she didn't get what she needed to get out of it, and that troubles me.
Other things that troubles you probably are healthcare, and you talked about mental health to a bit. So why don't you talk about mental health and physical health? What at the state level, what should the state be doing now about healthcare?
Well, I want to applaud the General Assembly this year for addressing mental health in a way that they haven't done in several years. Unfortunately, it took an enormous tragedy in the lives of one of the senators to wake people up. I've been standing up for mental health issues for a very long time. So I do want to give credit to the General Assembly this year for finally waking up to it. But we know that depression is an enormous issue, mental illness is an enormous issue, and we have to put our money where our mouth is. If we say that we care about folks and we want to make sure that they're taken care of, then we have to provide funding and investment in those programs. If we have a golden opportunity right now with Medicaid expansion, with the Affordable Care Act. 400,000 Virginians are currently without services and without insurance. We have the opportunity with the Senate's plan to reach out to those folks and to provide a private health care for those people using federal dollars that we are paying into already at the tune of $5 million a day we lose for not accepting those funds. And I'm pretty frustrated about that. That's one thing that really got to me. Tom Rust, he's been a great leader, I'll give you that. He said he supported Medicaid expansion. On the same day that he voted with the Democrats, he was the only one, and I applaud him for that. On the only day he voted for that, later in the afternoon, the House's budget bill came up, and guess what? He flipped over and voted with the Republicans, and that did not include Medicaid expansion or the acceptance of the program. You know, we got to put our money where our mouth is, and if you say you believe in something, you got to champion that, and you got to fight for it, and you got to stand up for it and be consistent. That's the kind of leader that I want to be.
Okay. We've got about a minute and a half or so before the break. Talk a little bit about yourself. How'd you get, are you from this area, or how'd you get here?
Well, I grew up in Alabama and in Arkansas, and from the earliest age, I've been an activist. When I was 12, in Hot Springs, Arkansas, the same town that Bill Clinton went to, only boys were allowed to be crossing guards. My two brothers had been crossing guards, and by the time I got to the 6th grade, I said, hey, there's no reason you shouldn't allow us girls to do it. So I gathered my friends up and we went down and petitioned the principal. By the end of the school year, they installed me as the first girl in the history of the school, and it was co-ed ever since. But you know, I see a problem. I see somebody's not being treated right, and I feel really passionately that I can use my voice to make that for someone else. So I, went to Hollins College in Roanoke, Virginia, all women, and then following that got a job on the Hill with Richard Shelby, my senator from Alabama.
When he was a Democrat.
When he was still a Democrat. And I worked in all levels of government, most recently for John Faust, our Drainsville supervisor, and I'm back there now again working for him.
That's marvelous.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we'll be back in about 2 minutes, and we're going to be talking more about women's rights. We'll talk about immigration, equality, the environment, and we're having a marvelous time talking with Jennifer Boysco. Be right back.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. We're speaking with Jennifer Boysco, who ran for the House of Delegates in the 86th District in 2013, lost by the total of 32 votes, 0.15%. We've talked about a range of issues. Now, women's rights. That is a huge issue in our area. Tell us, why are the two parties? What's this antagonism about? What is the fissure here?
I believe that some consultants somewhere over the past few decades realized that this was a wedge issue and they could get people really riled up over it. And so the Republican Party has lashed onto this as their calling card. That's, talking about women's health, probably more people as I walked door to door wanted to talk about that than anything else. And I was really surprised by that. But it's one of the things that inspired me to run, because they just kept getting further and further and further to the right. I'm sure you're aware, personhood, the ultrasound bill, what we call the TRAP bill, which closes our clinics. When you end up on Saturday Night Live, you know that you've gone too far. And I brought this up with Mr. Russ several times and said, you know what? Our district is more moderate than this, and we don't believe that this is the direction you should go in. And he voted for a lot of this stuff, from restricting birth control to the TRAP bill where you're closing clinics. It's a very personal issue, and not one that I think a lot of men who are never going to meet these women or their doctors should have a decision over.
Right. It's kind of difficult to come up with kind of areas of compromise when you start off with limits on birth control. Mm-hmm. That seems to be like that's kind of far to one side before you even start compromising.
It is. One thing, my father's an Episcopal priest. I've studied theology a great deal. I understand if someone has a personal religious conviction about it. But we're not living in a society that is one religion. We're in a pluralistic society. And so quite often when I would talk to people who might have a very different opinion than me, we could agree that it should be between your doctor, your family, and your house of worship. But really the government's place, that they didn't fit in there. And I met people where they were.
Yeah. And do you see that your area, which goes from Herndon down past through Dulles down to the Sully area in Fairfax, and then kind of the northeastern corner of Loudoun County, so that 86th district, do you see a shift in public opinion in that area?
Well, there are some very, very democratic folks who live in the core right in the Herndon area. And then as you go further out, it tends to be a little bit more conservative. But I found that I was able to connect with people on just about everything, whether it was, making sure that women had breast cancer screenings and access to health care. I didn't find anybody who disagreed with me on that, Jeff.
I'm sure they agreed with you also on transportation. I have a little kind of a measure for myself when I pull out of my neighborhood street onto a main road. It's kind of, over the years, the backup has gotten longer and longer and longer, and I'm not sure where it's going to be 5 or 10 years from now. So your area, but the whole area is in the throes of a transportation mess. What would you like to see done?
Well, I'm really glad that we have metro expansion coming. And when working for Supervisor Faust, we worked on focusing not only on more roads, but multimodal options. So metro, bus, bikes, and pedestrian access. I think we're going to have to get people out of their cars and find ways. One of the things that we want to do at the metro stations is transit-oriented development, where you have people living, working, and playing right where they live, right in the same area. So they have less need to get out of their cars. And we see the millennials are really interested in this kind of lifestyle, where they don't necessarily have a car for every person who lives in the house. But right now, I've been working on VDOT maintenance for Supervisor Faust, and I tell you, we've because of the snow, overspent by $1 million the maintenance budget. So now we're not going to be able to fix everything that we had planned to fix. The gas tax has not been reassessed and indexed in how many years? Yeah. Decades. That's an opportunity that we might be able to do. I have a problem when the burden of the tax just goes on the homeowners, like in Fairfax County we have. So I would like to look at ways of diversifying ways that we can fund our needs. Because in Northern Virginia, for every dollar we send down, we get, two dimes back, I believe it is, something like that. That might be a generous estimate.
You talk about diversified. Well, we can kind of lay that into our population as a whole. Mm-hmm. We are a diverse population.
We are.
Immigration reform. Mm-hmm. Different groups have completely different positions on that, mm-hmm. Even within the immigrant communities. So what are you hearing, again, when you're out knocking on the doors? What are you hearing from people?
Immigration was not something that a lot of people wanted to talk about. However, I have been a strong proponent of things like the DREAM Act and finding a pathway to citizenship for years. It certainly was a divisive issue in Herndon, over the past decade, and it feels like we're moving forward and making some progress. I was very proud of our Attorney General, who spoke out last week,
Mark Herring,
to say that our dreamers should be able to go to college.
Actually, that was only a very small portion. It's like in the hundreds
mm-hmm.
of people who
really
there
would.
Were like 6 or 7 gates that they have to
mm-hmm.
all fit through, right?
And you don't want anybody getting an unfair advantage, but we need students to go on and learn. So, because we know the baby boomers are going to be retiring, who's going to take the jobs of the next generation? Who's going to be prepared with those, technology jobs and business and make sure our economy is thriving if we don't have an educated population? And we do live in a land and a community of very diverse people, and we want to make sure that nobody's left behind, but making sure that it's fair for everyone.
And would you see initiatives beyond what the Attorney General is proposing, or is that a good goal for the short term and see how it works out?
Sure.
How do you look at it?
I've always looked at immigration as a federal issue, and I hope that at the federal level our Congress will look at comprehensive immigration reform to create a pathway to citizenship for those who work hard and show that they really want to be Americans and do the hard work. That I think we need to give them a chance to do their work and let them take responsibility for that.
The environment is also primarily a federal concern because even in our own area, mm-hmm. several states and a district dump water into the Chesapeake water basin. Environmental issues. There has been some controversy on that, especially in Loudoun. So again, on the doors, what are you hearing from people?
Well, I think people really care about the environment, and as we see the extreme weather situations that we've witnessed over the past couple of years, I think people are starting to wake up to it, to understand that this really is a problem that we have to face and solve. It's very difficult to bite off the entire thing. alternative fueled vehicles. I think we need to continue incentivizing that. I think, again, our multimodal transportation to reduce our fossil fuel emissions and encourage people to really think about their effect on what they're doing, saving power. When you talk about things like stormwater, though, we're really faced with a huge challenge because the EPA requires states and localities to meet certain guidelines, and it's very difficult to get the permits that are required without taking some really expensive and difficult regulatory actions. And I would like to see us work with the federal government to figure out how we can make that more reasonable as we look at our stormwater planning in the future.
All of this, in the final analysis, for many people, comes down to jobs. People are afraid. If you lose your job today, you may have a real gap before you find another one. Skills are atrophying. So, at the state level, what do you think Richmond should be doing to increase the diversity and the availability of jobs in our area?
Well, I'll tell you that, towards the end of my race last year, that was the number one thing. In fact, I would be canvassing and people would walk up to me who I hadn't planned on talking because they were federal workers and the sequestration was hitting them hard. So it wasn't just federal workers, but it was the contractors and businesses who serve those groups. It was very painful and it was terrifying for so many people. We have to make sure that we're diversifying our economy. In the 86th district and in Northern Virginia, so many of our jobs are based on the federal government. We have an opportunity to expand our technology sector. We have wonderful technology groups here who we need to be incentivizing to bring more to Northern Virginia and to Virginia on the whole. South Side, they're hurting as well. They're not doing as well as we are. But making sure that our education system is excellent and making sure that we're an inviting community, giving all residents the opportunity to live happy lives regardless of their sexual orientation or their religion. If we don't make sure that we are inviting and make sure that our economic development does not continue, then we will be left behind because other states are willing to make inviting communities. But when we have folks from our General Assembly who get us on Saturday Night Live making fun of their anti-women's health, that doesn't make a Fortune 500 company want to come and be in Fairfax County or in Northern Virginia or Virginia at all.
Well, Jennifer, I want to thank you very much for coming on tonight. Again, the 86th district runs from the Herndon area, kind of right down past Dulles Airport, down to the Sully, and also includes Loudon. Then the next election won't be until 2015, but you're kind of pointing that way.
That's right.
And you think Rust is going to run for re-election?
Well, you know what? He's done so much. I would like to see him feel good about what he did and go out on a high. But I did let him know that I do plan to run again. And so thank you, Jeff.
It's going to be a pleasure watching you run again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on today.
We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
You Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. Now we're going to turn from politics to technology, and we're going to be talking with Tom Starr, who's a lead member of technical staff at the AT&T labs outside of Chicago. Tom was named one of the 100 most powerful people in telecom by Global Telecom Business Magazine just a few years ago. He holds 20 patents in the field of telecom, and he is the president of the Broadband Forum, MS degrees and BS degrees in computer science and engineering from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. He's also the author of a fascinating book, Virtual Vengeance, a novel that is centered on futuristic, and Tom, you can tell me if that's a good word or not, technology. So, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you. You've been a leader and innovator in telecom for 25 years. You have 20 patents. You've written 3 nonfiction books. Now you're writing fiction. Tell us about that.
Well, Jeff, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I would write fiction, I would say I'm an engineer. I don't write fiction. And I surprised myself. I think this was sort of stimulated by seeing what's going on in the internet and in the industry wide, and a variety of companies. Take a look at what's going on with interactive gaming, social networks, highly targeted advertising that's tied into web search, and this really has been a concern of mine for a long time in terms of the impact of technology on society. I've seen on a number of occasions where really cool technology is developed without a lot of thought of the impact on society. So, this sort of, I think, stimulated the story that suddenly appeared in my mind one day, and it really compelled me. It was a story that somebody had to tell, and it was me. And so I found myself compelled to write this story, and it's basically, very briefly, a story of in a world where teaching machines have become so effective. They've made teachers and classrooms obsolete, and everyone's taught by machine in this world. And the hero of the story is a professor of computer science at the University of Illinois, who discovers that advertising agency has slipped some brainwashing into these teaching machines on a nationwide scale. He discovers this, and the advertising firm and executive there silences him. He murders this professor, and later the murderer finds out that this professor of computer science had created a new form of life, and that new life form was very vengeful and was very hard to kill. And so as the story plays out, the murderer has to reckon for what he has done. So that's it. It was an exciting story, and I really enjoyed writing it.
Let's pull that back a little bit, and just in terms of technologies that you brought up. For one of those that you brought up was the ability to brainwash a large population. Yeah. Is that realistic? Do you see that as being possible in either today or in the future?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that we're already partway there. And the scary part is that most people either don't know or they don't care. And you may ask yourself, well, why don't people care about the fact that their behavior, their actions are being influenced so much already today? And well, if you read the book, you may find yourself becoming very paranoid about why people don't care that they're influenced so much by what they see in advertising. So in the story, you know, the advertising executive plays the villain, and but if you take a look at what's happening in the real world, when you do web searches, when you go shopping, when you look at news items or whatever, all that's being watched. And you have to remember that every time you do a web search, that's not free. You know, most people think, oh, it's free. It's not. You're providing valuable information to the company that does the web searching. They know how to monetize this information. They're making lots of money off of this. And this is being used for advertisers who then provide highly targeted advertising that modifies your behavior. And so that's already there today. And it's advertisers are incredibly sophisticated and effective at what they do, and it's very subtle. And you know, most times people don't realize that sometimes even unconsciously messages are being provided and influencing your behavior.
Is there anything is that just something that actually because it is cheap, we're just going to keep doing it, or is there something we should do about it?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm in my business, of course. My day job is involved with internet technology. So, you know, I think everybody likes the fact that the internet has all the power it does available for free, not really free.
Right.
And I don't think there's any way that we're going to back away from this. I think it's more a matter of educating people so they are aware of what's going on, that they are aware of the advertising and aware of you know, the subtle ways that when you go to various websites or web searches that you're being steered towards certain things. So I think it's a matter of, you know, advertising has been around for ages and it's always influenced us. And so, but more than ever, I think people need to be aware of the power that has.
I wonder if we'll even get to a time when, let's say, a wealthy person could kind of anonymize themselves by, you know, paying for some sort of services that will let them then use the internet, use all these services, but without ever really conveying any personal information, and pay a premium for doing so.
Yeah, there actually been some abortive attempts at doing something like that. They really haven't been seeing a lot of success. You know, there's you know, this idea of cookies. Most people are probably familiar with cookies, and you know, I'm sorry to tell you that cookies are sort of old-fashioned now, and that there actually are far more powerful techniques being used today. That again tracks your activities, your interests, your purchases on a personal level, and that, you know, they don't even need to put, you know, people think they can protect themselves by wiping the cookies off of their computer. Well, that helps a little bit, but unfortunately, things have gotten far more sophisticated than that. And there have been some efforts to try and anonymize things and protect it. You know, the trouble is it just gets unwieldy. It's a hassle.
Yeah, you kind of painted a picture here of this advertising genius, and I was thinking, you know, John Hamm plays the protagonist on Mad Men.
Yeah,
it's like you have Hal, the computer from 2001, now playing. Your character, kind of an iconoclast, viewed as an oddity by the computer community, and also Russian. So why, you know, why did you, when you're writing your character, why did you characterize your character that way?
Yeah, well, I've known a number of people from Russia, and they're fascinating people. They're over the top. kind of personalities, which makes for a great character in a book.
Right.
And they're very outspoken and a little impetuous. And all this makes for a great, just a fabulous character. And they're brilliant people also, at least, people I've dealt with that came from Russia. And so, I just, know these people, and they've always struck me as being, gee, what a great character for a story. It makes it interesting. It's not just another, Joe off the street. And so I think it adds some interest to the story.
It is kind of interesting as we watch the nightly news and we see what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Impetuous, creative are not some of the kind of the words that we think of when we think of people like Putin and the rest of that. It seems to almost be kind of a different characterization of Russians that you're talking about that oftentimes we see in the nightly news. But that's just an aside.
Yeah.
Getting back to your book, in Virtual Vengeance, teaching machines. This Russian is the last human teacher, and all teaching is now done by machines. Now, again, how realistic is that? How do you teach creativity? How do you teach logic? Well, how do you teach? How do you replicate the teaching mind in a machine?
Yeah, well, as is laid out in the book, computer-based teaching, it could, in theory, be incredibly effective, because it'd be like having the world's best tutor dedicated to the student. I mean, it's one-on-one, and it learns what works with that student, and it teaches just and particularly uses certain teaching techniques that work just for that student, and is absolutely attuned to the student. So if the student is missing a point, the machine immediately knows this and approaches it from a different way. It's like I said, it's like having the world's best tutor right there.
And how does the machine know?
So this, is part of the story, and actually you see this in the real world. Computers are playing a bigger part in a lot of the schools now. The students are getting iPads, and they're doing a lot of work on the iPads. Of course, in my story, this goes way beyond that. But the hero in the story, this Professor Yuri Petrov, one of the points he comes back to time and again in the story is that in this story, all the teachers have been replaced by teaching machines. There are hardly any teachers left. And he's always saying to everybody, we need human teachers. You need human interaction. You need that variability. You need that human element in the teaching. I very much believe that, and I think that's a huge part. But I do think there is also a role for computers and helping in teaching. If you take a look at today's education system, it is incredibly expensive. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's unbelievable that we spend so much money on this. Of course, there's a lot of value in education. And on top of that, I think a lot of people would have to agree that education is not so effective.
Let me stop you right there. We're going to come back and talk to that in the second part, also with singularity. Again, we're talking with Tom Starr.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
Here,
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett, and we're talking with Tom Starr, one of the most powerful people in the nation when it comes to the telecom industry, but who's also written a book, Virtual Vengeance, a novel about a rather futuristic play on technology. Tom, before we talked about technologies, we talked about your book a bit. What are other people saying about your book? What kind of reviews are you getting?
Yeah, I've gotten some really very nice reviews. I'm very, very pleased. Some of the readers have commented me that the writing is similar style to Michael Crichton, who of course wrote Jurassic Park and some other bestsellers. And other people, I just love it. They tell me, it's a page turner. I had one guy complaining to me that he was up until 2 a.m. because he couldn't put it down. I mean, you just couldn't ask for better comments from people. So, if you go on to Amazon.com, you can find the reviews for yourself. There's quite a few there, and quite favorable. And if you're interested, go there, take a look. It's available as on paperback as well as a Kindle ebook. And I've been getting some great feedback. People love it.
Yeah. Congratulations. Now,
thank you.
Johnny Depp has a movie, Transcendence, which has kind of a similar theme. Can you kind of compare and contrast for us?
Well, there is some similarity there, and unfortunately, it's another one of these cases where the movie wasn't as good as the book. And in the movie, you do have this idea of a computer science professor who is shot and it ends up with his mind being transferred into a computer. So there's a little bit of a thread common with my story there. However, I think I've done a much more accurate and detailed technical discussion of the issue. The director of that movie, Transcendence, didn't seem to worry too much about little details like gravity and information theory and having a contractor build an enormous underground computer center in a couple of weeks. I think people have made comments about my story, how it's very believable and seems to be well grounded in real science.
Tom, you are at AT&T Labs just outside of Chicago, one of the premier R&D labs in the world. And you're working primarily in terms of local access and networking.
Right.
So can you try to tell us, try to give us an image, let's say 5 years from now, I'm not talking far out in the future, let's say 5 years from now, what kind of stark differences are people at home networkers going to be experiencing?
Yeah, that's a good question for me because, the technology I work on is about five or 6 years out in the future. What I'm working on today, people will, be seeing in that time. And I'm involved, internationally, both in a couple different international telecommunications standards organizations to help spread this technology worldwide. And it's probably not surprising to tell you that the internet performance, the speed of the internet is going to be vastly faster and get out to more and more places. But also, the networks are going to get smarter in terms of its ability to support a wide range of services with high quality, and to avoid, hopefully, some of the problems people experience where the video kind of starts and stops, or it doesn't play as smoothly as you'd like. I think we'll get past those issues. And also, one of the big things I put a lot of my attention on is just trying to make it easy for customers, to make it so that we avoid technical problems, that it's a reliable service, and if there is an issue, the problems can be rapidly resolved. So, I think people are clearly adopting the internet more and more. And more people are working at home. I think that's going to be a surprisingly increasing trend, where people work at home, and they can do it because they have the very high quality, very high speed, reliable internet access at home that gets them anywhere.
We've kind of progressed in my lifetime from the mainframes to the PCs, to the tablets, to the phones. Google Glass. I mean, where are we going here? I mean, go on a little bit more than 5 or 6 years out. Go into the realm of virtual vengeance. Are we talking towards implants, and are we talking about that in what's left of my lifetime?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about implants, just because medically it's risky. I would think. I don't know if we need to resort to implants. I think it's pretty obvious that the world's going to go more and more wireless. You've already seen this, but it's going to get much more so. You'll have a small device. I think one of my pet notions is that you'll have a little thing that's maybe in your pocket, or clipped to a belt, or in your purse, or any place. That's carrying, it has, most of the, functionality, electronics, but no display, and no keyboard, nothing like that. And you talk about Google Glass. I think Google Glass will look like a toy 5 years from now, but there'll be things that go far beyond Google Glass that get you away from having that little, 4 or 5 inch screen on your cell phone. You won't need a screen on your cell phone, because you'll be able to see it all. Maybe something like the next generation Google Glass, or maybe it's going to be something that somehow gets directly into your nervous system. And you don't need a keyboard. There'll be I think a breakthrough there with both the input and output. I think that's one of the big restrictions of today's systems is the human input output. And we need to get away from the small screen.
Well, what kind of display are you envisioning here?
Well, getting very speculative. I'm thinking of something that hacks right into the human nervous system, right? If you can hack into the optic nerve, hopefully without a surgeon, slicing you open, right? But doing it in a much more, in less invasive way. That could be very exciting. And actually, I'm playing with a concept like that in a story, another science fiction story I'm just starting to write right now. So we'll see how that goes.
Are you one of those authors that once you have a book inside of you, you pretty much have to write it down in order to get it out of your system and get it out onto the paper, to get it out of your mind?
Absolutely. That's what happened to me with Virtual Vengeance. It was a story that, it's the story that drove me to write fiction, do something I never thought I'd do. It was just that the story was so, I thought I was so excited by it. I just had to tell the story.
Privacy is one of those issues that people talk about a lot. When you read the paper and you see these debates on privacy, what stirs your pot? What gets you? What do you think that people should really be focusing on?
Well, I do think privacy is a big issue. It's one of my sort of hot buttons that we have to be cautious about. Again, as today, when people are browsing the web and going to websites, I think they have no idea. There's all this uproar about the national security agency and how they're spying on everyone. And I kind of laugh a little bit when I hear all that, because sure, they're doing that, and we all knew they were always doing it. And I'm not saying that's all good at all, but the reason I laugh a little bit is because I think you should be far more worried about, and I don't want to name any companies by name, okay, but some of the big, web companies and what they're doing. I'd be a lot more worried about them, all right, because with things like the NSA, there is one way or another some exposure, some oversight. But with some of these various social networking and other web companies, there's not as much oversight and exposure as you might like to see there. So I'd be far more worried when it comes to privacy about, and it may not even be some of the big name companies that come to mind right away. It could be some of the smaller ones that are doing things. I'd worry much more about some of those private companies.
You talked about singularity, and that's a term that I'm not familiar with. Is that something that, why don't you tell us about that? Because I did some research, and it's an intriguing concept.
Yes, it is. So singularity is a word that describes a predicted or possible event in the future where computers, the computing power and sophistication of computers gets to the point where it's as smart as a human mind. And at that point, it then might be possible to transfer a human mind into a computer. And of course, once you do that, interesting things happen. Of course, you might have immortality, maybe. You might be able to travel at the speed of light, and geography is now meaningless. And I describe all this in the story. So one of the things that I do in Virtual Vengeance, which, if I could be a little immodest, I like to think I did better than some of these other stories about, humans' minds getting into a computer, is I try to get into a lot more depth and technical accuracy on what it would be like to live inside a computer. It would be an incredibly disorienting environment, that's for sure, but you would have some of these almost superhuman capabilities that would be pretty exciting. And so the story kind of takes advantage of some of that. Well,
I certainly would never forget my brother's birthday, and there are some things that are kind of normal for people, but it is I think we've seen that with Watson, with what's going on with the computer that won Jeopardy, was able to put together disparate thoughts.
Yes, right. The IBM's Watson computer is I think a real eye-opener. And also, if you take a look at some of the so-called big data systems, if you look at Siri today, it will look like a toy in 5 years from now.
Well, Tom, this has been a fascinating talk, and it's lasted far too short. I'd like to have you on again. Tom Starr, Virtual Vengeance, thank you very much, sir. This has been a real joy.
Thank you, Jeff. Great.